It's Tuesday, November 18th, 2008, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. I'm your host, Radical Russ Belville. Produced and distributed by the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in Washington, D.C., this is your NORML Daily Audio Stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Welcome to the most popular podcast regarding marijuana in all of America and all the world, featuring interviews with scientists, politicians, doctors, prohibition policy activists, regular cannabis consumers, musicians, and NORML staff and NORML's board of directors, along with music and comedy no other podcast can offer. You can always find out more about our show at our website, stash.normal.org, and continue the education and conversation on our blog as well. We're ending marijuana prohibition with education, one listener at a time. The podcasting and blogging technology for the NORML Daily Audio Stash is provided by Red Aphid Interactive Media. For your professional web design needs, visit redaphid.com. Good day, Stashers. Welcome to the podcast. We're glad to have you here. We want to remind you that all the stories we cover in our hemp headlines are also covered up on our blog at stash.normal.org, where you can get hyperlinks to the original news stories, photos, and occasionally videos of the stories we're covering here on the podcast. Also, if you'd like to support the growing truth about cannabis here on the Daily Audio Stash, we're looking to increase our advertising on the show and on the website. Our website gets about 10,000 hits per day from those who are most involved in reforming cannabis laws in this country and around the world. The podcast is downloaded by tens of thousands of people daily and is consistently in the top 20 of the government and organizations podcast as rated on iTunes. So check it out by giving us an email, stash@normal.org, and we can figure out how to get your advertisement out to the cannabis community. Now, Tuesday is our Government at Work Day, and it's quite a apropos subject for today. There have been a couple of major announcements from the transition team for the upcoming Obama administration that particularly will affect drug policy as we move forward. We'll be taking a look at those two appointments in our hemp headlines today. Also, we're visiting with Ed Orlett from the Drug Policy Alliance in Ohio, who's working on a medical cannabis bill in the state of Ohio. There's also a very important hearing taking place tomorrow, so we want to alert all of our Ohio listeners to that in the interview. And we'll be visiting with Paul Armentano, NORML's deputy director, who has a very important essay in the influential Capitol Hill blog, The Hill. So we'll be talking to Paul about that, the subject of which is how we've cut cigarette smoking to the lowest levels ever recorded, even without arresting anyone for it. Plus, we've got our regular musical break, a nice reggae break for a Tuesday, and all the other hemp headlines you've come to expect from this show. So let's get ready, load up your favorite water pipe, and enjoy your NORML Daily Audio Stash.
Hello, I'm Paul Stanford from the Hemp and Cannabis Foundation, or THCF. Medical marijuana is legal in 13 states today, and THCF has clinics in 8 of those states. Our doctors help qualified patients obtain an authorization for medical marijuana in their state. Patients are eligible for medical marijuana with a history of either severe chronic pain and or nausea, cancer, AIDS or HIV, hepatitis, glaucoma, seizure disorders like epilepsy, chronic muscle spasms such as multiple sclerosis or asthma, neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, and gastrointestinal disorders like IBS or Crohn's disease. If you or someone you know has one of these conditions, our doctors will help you obtain a permit for medical marijuana. THCF Medical Clinics has offices in Washington State, Oregon, California, Colorado, Hawaii, Nevada, Montana, and now Michigan. Call 1-800-723-0188 or go to the web at hemp.org or 1-800-723-0188.
Now it's time to take a look at the latest stories about marijuana from news organizations across America and around the world in our NORML Daily Audio Stash Hemp Headlines. Obama's Attorney General Eric Holder, supporter of stiffer marijuana penalties. From Newsweek.com. President-elect Obama has decided to tap Eric Holder as his Attorney General, putting the veteran Washington lawyer in place to become the first African American to head the Justice Department, according to two legal sources close to the presidential transition. Holder, who served as Deputy Attorney General during the Clinton administration, still has to undergo a formal vetting review by the Obama transition team before the selection is final and is publicly announced, said one of the sources, who asked not to be identified talking about the transition process. But in the discussions over the past few days, Obama offered Holder the job and he accepted, the source said. The announcement is not likely until after Obama announces his choices to lead the Treasury and State Departments. Eric Holder was also a U.S. attorney in Washington, D.C. in the mid-1990s. Now, this piece from the Washington Post, dated Monday, September 9, 1996, entitled Marijuana's Violent Side, Holder is calling for stricter penalties in the district for personal marijuana possession. In addition, U.S. Attorney Eric H. Holder, Jr. said in an interview that he is considering not only prosecuting more marijuana cases, but also asking the D.C. Council to enact stiffer penalties for the sale and use of marijuana. Holder said, quote, "We have too long taken the view that what we would term to be minor crimes are not important," end quote, referring to current attitudes toward marijuana use and other offenses such as panhandling. Holder said he hopes to discourage some of that activity by being tougher on marijuana crimes. New guidelines should be in place by the end of the month, he said, noting that the district could learn from New York's zero-tolerance policy. There, crime plummeted when police aggressively enforced quality-of-life crimes, including panhandling and public drinking, which gave officers an opportunity to check for drugs, guns, and outstanding warrants. Holder said, quote, "If you take these so-called minor crimes seriously and treat them fully, it has a ripple effect," end quote. The problem is in lumping in personal marijuana use with these other minor crimes. Panhandling and public drinking affect others in the public square. Personal possession of marijuana doesn't harm anyone in the public square. Now, public smoking should be like public drinking, only for adults in specially marked and patrolled areas. Otherwise, we don't arrest people for carrying a six-pack in a grocery bag on their way home. The same should go for a dime bag. Marijuana is only a crime by statute, not a crime with a victim. Vandalism and graffiti are bad for a neighborhood because they infringe on others' property and intimidate the public. Marijuana is only bad for a neighborhood because a statute puts marijuana under the control of criminals. President-elect Obama's selection of Eric Holder for Attorney General does not initially bode well for the change we can believe in, especially following the selections of Joe Mandatory Minimums Biden as Vice President and Rahm Silence Doctors on Medical Marijuana Emanuel as Chief of Staff. However, it isn't the 1990s anymore. Not one, but 13 states have medical marijuana now. 9 of 10 marijuana ballot initiatives passed this year. The president has an 8 million vote mandate for change and strong majorities in the House and Senate. Economic realities may force a reevaluation of federal marijuana policy. Maybe in the era of Obama, we'll see change in the hearts and minds of Biden, Emanuel, and Holder. But I'm not betting my stash on it. Representative Jim Ramstad, Republican of Minnesota, Obama's new drug czar? From the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. Representative Jim Ramstad's name is being bandied about in D.C. as a possible drug czar or head of the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy. President-elect Barack Obama is filling out his team, and Politico, a respected Washington tabloid that covers all things Washington, has mentioned the retiring Minnesota Republican as a potentially popular and bipartisan pick. Sources close to Ramstad, a recovering alcoholic and longtime proponent of mental health and drug treatment, say he might be interested. Although Ramstad cited fatigue with the weekly Washington commute in his decision to retire after 18 years in Congress, sources say that could be trumped by his passion for helping addicts like himself. Ramstad's spokesman, Dean Peterson, told Politico that it's, quote, gratifying to hear Jim's name being mentioned for drug czar, end quote. Peterson noted that Ramstad has worked for 27 years on anti-drug efforts in Congress and the Minnesota Senate. Peterson told Politico, quote, as a recovering person, he's worked every day to help those suffering the ravages of chemical addiction, end quote. All right, let's just see how Jim Ramstad has worked in the U.S. Congress to help all of us ravaged cannabis consumers. He voted against the Hinchy-Rohrbacher Amendment in 2007 and in 2005. That's the one that would have suspended funds used by the Department of Justice to conduct raids in medical marijuana states. In other words, Jim Ramstad voted to continue raids in medical marijuana states. He voted in 1999 for the D.C. Appropriations Bill, specifically Section 167 there, that said that even though 69% of the residents of the District of Columbia approved medical marijuana, D.C. couldn't spend any money to enact the initiative. Actually, when it first came out, they prohibited them from even counting the votes to see whether or not the initiative passed. So, when D.C. supported medical marijuana, Jim Ramstad did everything he could to make sure it wouldn't be allowed. And just this February, Jim Ramstad was named to the board of directors of Joseph Califano's CASA, the National Center on Addiction and Substance Abuse. This is from their press release, quote, we are honored to have Congressman Ramstad join our board of directors, end quote, said Joseph A. Califano, Jr., CASA's chairman and president and former U.S. Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare. Quote, he is an outstanding and tenacious leader in the effort to obtain parity in health insurance reimbursement for substance abuse and mental health. With Representative Ramstad's support, we hope to begin a cultural change potent enough to prompt a revolution in the way our government addresses substance abuse and addiction, end quote. By declaring responsible adult cannabis users addicts and using workplace drug testing and mandated rehab to funnel their health insurance money into the drug treatment industry. So, for a new drug czar, for the change we can believe in, we might get an anti-medical marijuana recovering alcoholic who serves on a board for a group that shamelessly promotes the not your father's Woodstock weed debunked cannabis potency arguments and trumpets the drug court mandated cannabis treatment as proof there is an epidemic of marijuana addiction. And that's who we get to go with Attorney General Eric Tough on Marijuana Crimes Holder, Vice President Joe Mandatory Minimums Biden, and White House Chief of Staff Rom Silence Doctors on Medical Marijuana Emanuel. Gee, are you sure John Ashcroft's not available for the job? Prosecution of Montana woman, medical cannabis caregiver, will continue. From the Montana Standard. A judge has ruled that a Beaverhead County woman charged with growing and selling marijuana was not protected by Montana's medical marijuana law because she did not have the required permit when charged with the drug crimes. District Judge Lauren Tucker said in court records that Summer Sutton Day, who was charged earlier this year with production, possession, and intent to sell marijuana, did not have a medical marijuana registry identification card at the time she was arrested. Therefore, the evidence from a search and seizure of her home outside of Dillon could be used against her in the case. Tucker was ruling on a motion to dismiss or suppress the evidence because Sutton Day received a permit shortly after the raid on her home. Tucker ruled after Sutton Day's arrest that she could possess and use marijuana because she had the permit. But he said in the more recent decision that without the permit at the time of the raid, Sutton Day has no protection under the medical marijuana law. Sutton Day was charged with the crimes along with Scott Day, who died last month at the age of 34 after battling a debilitating disease all his life. Both were issued the medical marijuana cards to help treat numerous symptoms, including severe pain. Scott Day was obviously a medical marijuana user. His wife was obviously his caregiver. They didn't have official government papers recognizing those roles, but any human being with a conscience can recognize that's what they were. They had many marijuana plants, more than even a registered Montana patient should have, let alone an unregistered patient. But what is the spirit of the Montana law? To end the arrest and incarceration of sick people using cannabis as medicine. What good does it do the state of Montana to lock up this woman? If she's found to have broken the letter of the law, at worst, let her be fined or given probation or community service, but does anyone feel any good is being done by placing her in a penitentiary with real criminals? She just lost her husband after caring for him through years of pain at just 34 years old. How much more should she suffer for tending a garden? In 1937, Samuel Caldwell was the first person arrested for marijuana in the United States. In 2008, the 20 millionth person was arrested for marijuana in the United States. After 71 years of this failed prohibitionist policy, it's time to say enough and demand a change. NORML is calling on you to help spread the word, and in doing so, you could win $2,500 in our 2008 Pro-Cannabis Law Reform Ad Contest. Just create a 30 or 60-second video or flash animation explaining why we need to end adult marijuana prohibition. Theme ideas, examples from past contests, and the contest rules are all available at NORML.org. Just look for the Pro-Cannabis Ad Contest banner. You could win your share of $10,000 in prizes, and the grand prize $2,500 winner will be featured in upcoming NORML web and television campaigns. Join our Pro-Cannabis Ad Contest today. Deadline for entries is Saturday, November 15th, 2008. Tuesday is our look at your government at work, here at the Audio Stash. While the inevitable re-legalization of cannabis hemp will have to happen at the federal level, the steps leading to that destination take place at the state and municipal levels. We focus in on the initiatives, bills, and amendments regarding cannabis across all 50 states, and what activists like you are doing to enact a positive reform to our cruel and outdated marijuana laws. If you're working hard to make an impact in your city and state, please email us at stash@norml.org and let's share your local efforts with the worldwide cannabis community. Together, we can affect our government at work.
Afternoon pollution rises high into the sky. How can we still deny the truth?
In the wake of this 2008 election, where we had 9 out of 10 pro-marijuana measures pass on the ballot, there are states and localities all around the country that are scrambling now to get measures on their ballot or through their legislatures that would ease the marijuana laws for medical users and maybe do some reform on the other users of marijuana. So we're going to look now to the great state of Ohio, and we're joined by Ed Orlett from Drug Policy Alliance Ohio. You can look them up at www.drugpolicy.org. And Ed, thanks for joining us here on the Daily Audio Stash.
My pleasure, Russ.
Now, I understand tomorrow there's a really important meeting for your Ohio, is it the legislature there?
Yes, the Ohio legislature. This will be a meeting of the Senate Judiciary Criminal Justice Committee tomorrow at 10 a.m.
Oh, okay. And what's on the agenda for discussion there?
two bills that we're very interested in. One is Senate Bill 343, which does enact a statutory mechanism to regulate and authorize the medical use of marijuana by qualifying patients. And the other is a sentencing reform bill that's been working its way through this General Assembly for almost 2 years. It was brought by the administration. It's to try to keep our prison populations from just exploding, and it also does some good things as far as drug offenses.
Okay, well, let's look at the SB 343, the medical marijuana bill. I know in the Midwest now we're looking at hopefully better chances of getting these bills passed because of Michigan's success. Michigan actually passed their medical marijuana bill in all 83 counties, which is very promising. How does the groundwork look for Ohio and your legislature's support of medical marijuana?
In all candor, Russ, we still have a lot of education to do. This bill that is being heard tomorrow has been pending since May, and it's a very comprehensive bill. It's nothing, outlandish in it. It's pretty straightforward. I was looking over the Michigan initiative, and it's very similar to it in many ways, but still, speaking very practically, the legislature here adjourns on sometime between now and the end of the year, and in all probability, this is going to be the only hearing this bill will get this year. There's always a possibility of a second hearing, but they have so much on their platter, I'm not expecting that. And of course, the bill, as I understand it from the sponsor and from advocates, will be reintroduced in the next session, and we'll just go from there.
Okay. So for tomorrow's hearing, and this hearing, by the way, is at 10 a.m. at the Senate Judiciary Criminal Justice Committee at the State House there in Ohio. And I was just also wondering, as far as getting these bills passed here, if it would help to have any public coming down to testify to their use of medical marijuana or anything like that, or just maybe for some visible support.
Anyone can attend, and if they wish, can give testimony. All they have to do is come to the hearing. I'd suggest if they want to testify, they come early so they can fill what's a witness slip, and then when the bill is called for a hearing, and I'm not sure if there's only 3 bills up, so it won't take too long to get to it. Then the chairman of the committee, which is Senator Grendell, he will call the witnesses normally in the chronological order that they arrived. And the Ohio Patients Advocates Network, that has been one of the leading proponents of this legislation and helped to get it in the Senate and get a hearing for it, they have lined up 3, I don't want to say expert witnesses, but let me say professional. They have a doctor and they have 2 nurses who practice, who work with patients who could use or have used medical marijuana. So they have, I think, a very good lineup. And of course, it's an open public hearing, and anyone can come and testify if they feel they have something to contribute that would, be positive.
Yeah, I would definitely encourage any Ohioans out there that are in need of medical marijuana, that have a personal story to tell, to get out there and tell that story, because when you put a human face on this, it's a lot harder for legislators to believe the lies and the propaganda that come out against medical marijuana, when you're looking at someone who can really benefit from it. Now, the other bill that we're looking at, this one's on the House side, House Bill 130, a criminal sentencing reform bill. What are some of the reforms that bill would enact in Ohio statute?
Well, first of all, Russ, this bill has passed the House and is now appearing for its first hearing in the Senate, also in the same committee. It recognizes that people with drug offenses a lot of times have not committed any other crime. They're not violent, and so it would provide a vehicle for the courts to give those people more of a chance to avoid going to prison by offering them a treatment program.
Oh.
And that's the primary feature we're interested in. But it does some other things as far as post-release programs to try to keep people from coming back to prison, as we know a lot of them do, unfortunately.
That's excellent. Now, I imagine Ohio must be like other states right now that are having a real trouble with their state budgets and maybe, building more prisons than universities. Is that the situation in Ohio?
That is exactly the situation. How we have been fortunate in that we have not had to build any additional prisons now in a number of years. But in the 80s, after the emphasis was placed on drug crimes, and particularly during the crack epidemic, we did build certainly more prisons, and we were building colleges. And, of course, we're now have the burden of operating those.
Yeah.
And it does take a lot of money that could be much better used for education.
All right. So tomorrow at 10 a.m. At the State House, is there a particular office room?
It'll be in the Senate office building, North Hearing Room.
Okay. That's tomorrow at 10 a.m. Hearings on SB 343 for medical marijuana, HB 130 for criminal sentencing reform, and Ed Orlett is with the Drug Policy Alliance of Ohio. Do you guys have any websites, email addresses, or phone numbers you'd like to give out for people to get more information?
They certainly can look at the website that you mentioned at the beginning, www.drugpolicy.org. They can feel free to call our office, which is 614-257-1356.
All right. Excellent. And Ed Orlett, thank you so much for standing up for the rights of medical marijuana patients and fighting for some change, some positive change in the state of Ohio. We appreciate you joining us here on The Stash.
Thank you, Russ.
I'm Alan St. Pierre, Executive Director of NORML. Have you heard about the new super pot that's supposedly 20 times more potent than your father's Woodstock weed? Don't believe the hype. Marijuana's THC potency has always varied, even in the 60s and 70s. And the drug czar's numbers are full of, well, exaggerations. While no intoxicant is harmless, cannabis is non-toxic and far safer than alcohol. No matter how much you smoke, of whatever potency, you cannot die of a marijuana overdose. Potency is irrelevant anyway. More potent pot just means you smoke less of it, meaning less harmful smoke in your lungs. This is a prime example of harm reduction in action. Besides, the government already allows the prescription of THC pills. Its commercial brand name is Marinol, and it's 100% potent. Meanwhile, the federal government won't allow dying people to use natural marijuana, no matter what the potency. Does this make sense to you? Learn the facts about pot. Visit NORML.org today.
Here at the NORML Daily Audio Stash, we work hard to change our nation's marijuana laws through education and discussion. But we also take time to relax and unwind with an eclectic mix of pod-safe music from many independent artists. We look for music that speaks to the growing truth about cannabis, or music that speaks to broader themes of freedom, liberty, social justice, equality, and protest. To find out more about the artists and download the music you hear on this podcast, just log on to stash.normal.org. And if you'd like to get your music heard by the online cannabis community, just send us an email at stash@normal.org.
You know what I haven't featured yet, my fellow Stasherinians? Reggae. That's right, one of the most ganja-influenced forms of music on the planet, and I have yet to play a single song of it. I feel kind of ashamed, to be honest. So let me rectify that by playing Herbsman's Anthem, or Herbsman's Anthem if you're English, by Brooklyn reggae artist Mojo Morgan. Morgan is originally from the band Morgan Heritage, which formed in the 80s and had many reggae hits in the 90s onward. They toured across the world, including sold-out stadiums in Senegal, Gambia, and Mauritius. Their most recent reggae hit is Nothing to Smile About. Mojo has decided to take a solo route, and if Herbsman's Anthem is any indication, he will continue to be successful in the reggae genre, as he splices together his personal influences, including rock and roll and hip-hop. The track also features vocals by the uber-legendary, late, great Peter Tosh, and if you don't know who Peter Tosh is, then I seriously question your status as a marijuana activist. You can listen to more of Mojo's music on his MySpace page, which is featured on our Stash blog, stash.normal.org. And without any further ado, here is Mojo Morgan with Herbsman Anthem.
Herbsman move, cause the rain is coming down, police I lose, get your feet up off the ground, Herbsman warning, getting higher, they no fool for PJ, send it off from J.A. No, him prime up the minister and pave the way. Sweet up the steward and fly the plane. Distribute to the masses and light the jet. No, him gone down our west, we build up a local flat. Give up him seat, cause him done with that. You still down a bush, I build up a local stash. Never think him would have send the beast to come lock you down. Earthman don't fear falling down. Either way, don't you keep no phone, no how. They'll see the raid coming, and they'll say no way they warning. Earthman, don't you fear of falling down. Make you move and stay low to the ground. Policeman blazing coming, the soldiers are following burning. No, it seem you lost, I got turn to gain. Just look over yonder where you seek is there. Take sleep, mark death and make a change. It's the end of short day, beginning a long day. So you see the night, Zion holds your reward. No blood, not up on your shoulder, so take no regard. The evil way them do say they must get it back. Just go in the nation, I won't let them keep you down. Earthman, don't fear of falling down. Either way, don't you keep no phone, no how. They'll see the raid coming, and they'll say no way they warning. Earthman, don't you fear of falling down. Just make you move and stay low to the ground. Policeman blazing coming, the soldiers are following. Say I and I feel your pain. Your work is not in vain. Say Earthman, we feel your pain. Your work is not in vain. Most I will cut and clear the way. Most I will cut and clear the way. Most I will cut and clear the way. Hey, hey. Earthman, don't fear of falling down. Either way, don't you keep no phone, no how. They'll see the raid coming, and they'll say no way they warning. Earthman, don't you fear of falling down. Make you move and stay low to the ground. Policeman blazing coming, the soldiers are following burning. Earthman, don't fear of falling down. Either way, don't you keep no phone, no how. They'll see the raid coming, and they'll say no way they warning. Earthman, don't you fear of falling down. Make you move and stay low to the ground. Policeman blazing coming, the soldiers are following burning. Earthman, don't fear of falling down. Either way, don't you keep no phone, no how. Hey, Earthman, don't you fear of falling down. Make you move and stay low to the ground.
Hey, how's it going? My name's Will. I don't work at a used record store. I don't own an iguana, although I'm sure they make great pets. I don't have dreadlocks or play the acoustic guitar. I can remember quite well, thank you, and no, I don't constantly have the munchies. When 420 comes around, I've still got 40 minutes of work left. I've never hit a girl on a bike with my car or shot my friend with a shotgun. I've never had to apologize for letting a girl I was watching drown in a pool while I was getting high because, duh, I wouldn't be getting high if I was around children. I'm a regular guy who works regular jobs, just like the majority of all Americans who use marijuana occasionally and responsibly. My name is Will, and I'm normal.
Well, I've been commenting on it for the past couple of days, this new report that came out through Reuters Health. Smoking rates have been cut to the lowest levels ever recorded. And really good news we just found out, too, is that our deputy director, Paul Armentano, wrote a piece that got picked up in the very influential blog, the Hills Congress blog. And so I figured we would bring Paul Armentano himself on to talk about it. So, Paul, welcome back to the Stash.
Good to be here, Russ.
You know, this is a really exciting time in American politics. A lot of people are caught up in the sweeping mandate for change. And so I think it's a pretty significant thing that we've got this post up there. You know, the people in Washington, D.C. are going to be reading this. And it shows that there's a big debate here that we should tax and regulate marijuana like we do cigarettes or alcohol.
Well, certainly I hope that members of the new administration, take a good look at this. Everyone can actually go up online and see this article if they simply go to blog.thehill.com, and I encourage folks to comment on this. People outside of Washington, D.C. may not be familiar with the Hill publications, but I can tell you as someone who lived and worked in Washington, D.C. for about a decade, this is really the publication that Washington insiders read. This is the publication that the staffers of congressional lawmakers read. You know, this is the sort of publication that federal politicians themselves, they read and they post quite frequently on. In fact, my post appears on the Congress blog, which is almost exclusively populated by members of Congress. So this is the audience we want to get in front of, and the message of this post is that if Congress was really serious about trying to drive down rates of adolescent marijuana use and really marijuana use in general, they would take a page from the way we deal with tobacco in this country, and they would tax and regulate marijuana in a similar manner to alcohol and tobacco.
Absolutely. You know, the argument could be made here too that a lot of the harms that we get would go away as well. I mean, you never find any stories of renegade tobacco farmers in the national parks, you know, anything like that. There's so many things that would also be cured by this, and it's good to see that argument making it to the pages where the lawmakers can see it.
Sure, most definitely. I mean, I was really surprised, even as somebody who follows this issue fairly closely, when I saw last week that the CDC reported that rates of adult use of tobacco had fallen to the lowest levels ever recorded. If you go back to 1965, you know, more than 40% of the adult American public was smoking cigarettes. And today that percentage is lower than 20%. Now, if you contrast that with recorded rates of marijuana use, and you go back to that same year, 1965, the government claims that just over 500,000 Americans began their use of marijuana that year. Today, it's more than 2.5 million Americans every year begin smoking marijuana. So you have use of one substance, in fact, a highly addictive substance, that being nicotine. Use has dropped dramatically, yet the federal government has not arrested 20 million Americans to get that result. By contrast, the use of marijuana has consistently been rising these last 40-plus years, and the federal government has used the heavy hand of the law. They've used drug testing, probation, the DARE program, propaganda. They've spent millions upon millions, in fact billions of dollars, on this totally failed policy.
Yeah, and everyone's talking about cutting inefficient government programs and slashing government waste and fraud. And boy, you couldn't find a better place to start slashing than this stupid war on marijuana. That's for sure.
You know, it is, and even when we look at the subject of adolescent use of cigarettes, if you go back to 1997, according to, you know, once again according to the CDC, about 37% of high schoolers said they had smoked cigarettes in the last 30 days. That percentage currently is also at 20%. So you've got a 45% decline in teen tobacco use just in the last 10 years. You know, once again, you know, if the federal government had these sort of numbers for marijuana, they'd be celebrating, they'd be tap dancing, everybody would know about it. But instead, what we have is, if we look at the Monitoring the Future study out of the University of Michigan, and you go back all the way to 1975, approximately 1 out of every 2 graduating high school seniors says they use marijuana. We haven't made a dent in influencing young people's attitudes toward the use of marijuana, but we've made a significant change in young people's attitudes towards tobacco. And once again, I reiterate, we've done so without necessarily lying to our children, and we've certainly done so without arresting our children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was interviewing someone for The Stash last week who had made a comment about it's almost as if marijuana and tobacco have swapped places. And it was in reference to, you know, Hollywood and movies and popular culture, where today, if you were to see a film, you know, you'd be more likely to see someone smoking a joint than smoking a cigarette. But boy, you go back to the 60s and it was, prevalent in all the films and TV shows. I mean, Edward R. Murrow was smoking cigarettes at the news desk, live on the evening news. So, it's amazing the change that has come about through, just the education, that we give people about tobacco and by treating it as a personal choice, but one that you can go into with the facts and understanding what the real medical issue is, rather than, like you say, propagandizing and all these methods of incarceration and harassment of users that, one, I think the propagandization turns people off. They believe the opposite. And number two, the prohibition here, I think, creates kind of a culture, a black market, a renegade kind of feeling that you're breaking the law and you're bad. And it kind of, I think, attracts people to it that wouldn't maybe normally be attracted to it. I mean, what do you think about it? I mean, that's a pretty wide-ranging question, but what do you think about those things?
Well, there's always some element of the forbidden fruit factor when it comes to young people and marijuana, and, probably by the same token when it comes to young people and alcohol. I think the difference between those two substances and tobacco at this point is that, young people don't want to use cigarettes. They don't want to pick up the habit of smoking or chewing tobacco. They recognize now, as the rest of society does, that the use of tobacco over long periods of time can be quite harmful to health. It can potentially be fatal if used long enough. And they're also aware that use of that substance is highly addictive, so that if they initiate their use of the drug as a young person, they might find themselves 20, 30 years later still using tobacco and unable to quit. So cigarettes have that reputation, that well-earned negative reputation. Marijuana does not have such a reputation because it does not pose the same risk to the user that tobacco does, regardless of what the government tries to say about it. So here you have a federal campaign warning young people about the use of tobacco, and young people accept that. They get it. They've seen the harms. They hear a similar campaign about marijuana, and they ignore it because they, through first-hand and second-hand experience, know that that campaign and the things that the government tells them about marijuana are not true, and that marijuana does not hold the same potential dangers as does tobacco. And people are rational beings, and frankly, they're making the safer choice. They're not using tobacco, and some of them are, in fact, trying marijuana.
Maybe that uncovers the government's motivation behind lying about marijuana is because they have to. With the tobacco issue, they can just let the facts speak for themselves and people will make the rational decision. But with marijuana, if they were to tell the truth, people might actually choose to use it.
Yes, exactly. And I think, there was a time when society was, unaware of some of the dangers of tobacco. That time has really passed. And the greatest evidence of that is the fact that these use rates have been trending downwards now for decades. And I think they're going to continue to, regardless of whether the government, launches a nationwide publicity campaign, talking about the dangers of tobacco. In some respects, the government almost doesn't need to, because the American public are already aware of it. They've seen their family members use tobacco, and they've seen them get very sick and die from their use of tobacco. They don't have a similar experience with marijuana because marijuana does not pose the same health threat.
Yeah, and it's good to see that this discussion, again, is getting out to the makers of law and the shapers of policy out there in Washington, D.C. So let's give everyone another chance to get out to that site. Give them the website so they can go comment out on your post and the title of the post, too.
Sure. Everybody should log on to the Internet, and they should go to blog.thehill.com, and if they go to November 17th, and they will find several blog posts, but mine is called "We've Cut Cigarette Smoking by Half, and We Didn't Have to Arrest 20 Million Americans to Do It." And as you noted, I do think it is very important for people, the American public, to comment on this issue so that our lawmakers in Washington see that this is an issue that the American people care about, and they want the federal government to act upon.
Yeah, we're seeing it all.
One of the most ironic things about Election Day was the fact that you had 10 out of these 11 ballot initiatives regarding marijuana pass you know what that tells me? It doesn't just tell me that the American public demands change on this issue. It tells me that the politicians have abdicated their responsibility to act in the public's best interest. We shouldn't be having to change laws at the ballot box. The politicians should be doing these actions for us. And the fact that they're not is truly saddening. And that's why I think, once again, it's important for people to comment on forums like the Hill, so that those in Washington really get a bird's eye view of where the American people are coming from on this issue.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought, I was just bringing that up too. The election results, show that this discussion has already happened, at the state and local levels, and the people have pretty much spoken on the issue. I spoke with, George Rohrabacher on his post, where he noted that, in Michigan, all 83 counties, even the counties that voted for John McCain, voted in favor of medical marijuana up there. So again, the discussion's happening. The politicians need to catch up.
True. Certain pundits will look at the election results and say things like, well, there seems to be a policy shift in America when it comes to their attitudes toward marijuana. No, the shift has already happened. The people have decided. It's simply only being manifested, in these local and state votes because, Washington, D.C. has had their head in the sand. Yeah,
in a few other places. Paul Armentano is the deputy director of NORML. His post is on the Hill blog at blogthehill.com, and we'll have links to that up at stash.norml.org, so you can also find it that way. And Paul, I understand you're headed out for vacation. I hope you have a great vacation, and we'll talk to you again sometime.
Great. Look forward to it.
Thank you for downloading the NORML Daily Audio Stash, the growing truth about cannabis. We are produced by the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in Washington, D.C. Our executive producer is Alan St. Pierre. Our deputy director is Paul Armentano. Our webmaster is Brian Judy, and web production is provided by Red Aphid Interactive Media. As always, you can catch up on the latest information about marijuana at www.norml.org. And you can interact and download from our Audio Stash blog at stash.norml.org. For everyone here at NORML, I'm your host, Radical Russ Belville, hoping all your harvests are bountiful and your encounters with law enforcement are non-existent. We leave you today with another cannabis quote, this one from Peter Bourne, who was the former drug czar under President Jimmy Carter, who said, quote, "We did not view marijuana as a significant health problem, as it was not. Nobody dies from marijuana. Marijuana smoking, in fact, if one wants to be honest, is a source of pleasure and amusement to countless millions of people in America, and it continues to be that way." End quote. Oh, for the good old days when we could have a drug czar who could tell the truth about marijuana. Well, we'll just have to wait and see. Let's see if we've got any of that change we voted for, or are we going to continue the same old war on marijuana that's been going on for over 30 years now? Make your opinion known. Go to the change.gov website and tell Barack Obama what you want, and that is a change in the way we deal with marijuana. I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for downloading the podcast. We'll be back tomorrow. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.